After last week's debacle against Baylor, it's not a matter of if, but only when Kansas State players start hitting the transfer portal.
You are Locked On College Crossover, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
To another crossover edition of the Portal, mixed in with Kansas State. We're going to have a lot of fun with this one because there are so many possibilities. Locked On K-State host Christian Raugh is going to have his take. So am I about which guys, or if it's just going to be a plethora, are going to hit the portal. Talk a little Avery Johnson. He's certainly going to have people coming after him, and he played really well against Baylor. It's a shame that situation is what it is. Also going to talk about, is there any solution for Kansas State? And finally, we're also going to talk a little bit about the Big 12. It is a wild conference. Will it be a one-bid league for the NCAA playoff, or maybe somebody else gets in as well? To help me figure out everything here, Mr. Christian Raugh, what's going on, brother?
Well, I mean, I wish it was on better terms that we were discussing, but usually when I come on your show, unless it's an off-season discussion, it's because there's chaos in Manhattan, mayhem in Manhattan, and that's exactly what's happening. An absolute meltdown, if you will, with the Kansas State squad. 2-4 is not what I expected by any means, by any just imagination, you name it. I just did not have any idea this we're going to get here, but here we are. So there we go.
I think that this is it safe to say, just as an interjection, this is one of the 5 most disappointing teams in college football this year? At least make the argument for it.
Yeah, I would say 5 would be a long shot. I would say 3 and not 3. I mean, what else? Who else would you put in the discussion? I think Kansas State is easily one of the most disappointing teams this season. This is a team that had expectations being 10-2. That was my prediction. I think that you had the same prediction as well on the offseason show we had. I thought this team was a for sure kind of conversation of making it to Arlington to battle for the college football playoffs. And then you get your only win of the season at first is a game-winning drive against an FCS school who was starting a quarterback who's making his first collegiate career start. And then against the UCF team with a rebuilding, bringing Scott Frost back, and a team that's going to be seen probably most likely at the bottom, maybe not fully at the bottom like Kansas State, but towards the bottom of the Big 12. You know, there's a lot of really disappointing feels for Kansas State. And I mentioned this on my show earlier in the week. The Baylor game is just icing on the cake. If you were 4-1 heading into that game, and then or 5-0 even, and you got that loss the way you did, you wouldn't feel the same way, because there was a lot of things to be excited about moving forward. But since it's the 4th loss of the season, it feels completely different. And it just shows that there's not a lot of hope in this program right now. And when you look at the coaching staff, the players, the amount of players that could leave this next year, especially the recent news that just dropped of what the portal is going to be, lots of crazy stuff, man, and definitely not a good feeling if you're a Kansas State Wildcat fan.
Yeah, I couldn't argue with a single thing that you just said. So let me reiterate my main point here. And Christian can certainly take this any way he wants. I didn't watch it start to finish. I watched parts of it, then went back and watched the highlights. But K-State kind of hit their stride there in that second quarter. It looked like they were just going to cook them. And then they just became disheveled. Like, it was so out of the blue. Can you explain that to me? Because it's almost a microcosm of the season.
Yeah, it's so out of the blue if you don't see the predictable things happening that you have seen over the last couple weeks with Kansas State. Look, the energy was there for the most of the game, and it was a hot game. And Chris Kleiman likes to say they used a lot of players because it was such a hot game. They knew it was going to be the case. And, you know, Baylor is a good football team, not taking anything away from Baylor. And this is a game that I thought was going to be the Big 12 game of the year. And then you find it being the early slot on ESPN Plus. Now, for the record, I think it still was a hell of a game. You know, a 1-point loss, the way the game ended on a blocked field goal is still a great football game if you're not a fan of Kansas State football. You were up by 2 scores with a minute left to go in the third quarter, and then you find a way to lose this football game. Avery Johnson played one of the best games he did in a Kansas State uniform. Career high in passing yards by a long shot. It was his 2nd time and this season going over 300 yards, 344. It's his career high. He rushed for 10 carries for 72 yards, something that I am definitely paying attention to when it comes to carries. And you still find a way to lose that football game. Of course, he did have a pick six in that one, but if you take that one play away, I think he played the best Kansas State football you could absolutely ask for. And if that pick six never happened, you're talking about how amazing Avery Johnson is. And he's probably getting talked about at a national level yet again, at least for this week. But instead, you move to 2-4 on the season. You have a time management issues once again for coaching staff for Kansas State that put them in a scenario that allowed Sawyer Robertson to move it down the field with Michael Trigg, who's an insane wide receiver, of course, NFL talent on both of those players, and find a way to win the game and score a game-winning field goal to win 35-34. You know, when I look at this game in the Kansas State viewpoint, there's a lot of things that went right, and I mentioned that earlier, but you didn't win the football game. And all of those moved to the wayside, especially when you get your fourth loss of the season. And there's going to be plenty of players that we talk about here soon, Brian, that aren't going to be in a Kansas State uniform next year. And I'm not talking about because they're running out of eligibility.
It's called the transfer portal, Christian. Have you heard of it?
Sure is. I think I have. Is there a show about it? Like, does someone do one specifically?
Yeah, that would be me. That is a great point. Thank you very much for that. Yeah, it's Kansas State could be a bottom feeder next year in the Big 12, not because they laid an egg, because their talent laid an egg.
Yeah.
Because I'm just going to name a few players off. Edwards, Johnson. I mean, what are the odds that both of them are back in Manhattan next year?
Well, let's
10%?
start with Avery Johnson. Yeah, if I want to put a number on it, 10% sounds good. And I think that 10% has to be where you win out the rest of the season and get yourself to a warm and fuzzy back in 8-4. And you say, well, you had a great end. You rebounded great. You found a way to regain your composure and you fight for retention yet again. That was the message, it seems like, last offseason was we got to 9-4. We won our bowl game. We have momentum. Let's try and run this back. If you don't meet that same standard at the very minimum, how can you make that message again? And when you have people calling for the head coach either to retire or to be fired, with the amount of Chris Kleiman, the relationship he has with athletic director Gene Taylor, and the fact that he did win you a Big 12 championship in 2022, let's not take that away from him. I don't think that there's going to be an in-season firing. That's just my personal opinion. I think at the best case scenario, if you're in that position and when you want Chris Kleiman to go, if that is your position, I think that best case scenario for that would be him retiring at the end of the season. But if that's the case, then I think those players leave regardless anyways. Avery Johnson is only proving that he can still shine with a team that's not performing well. Imagine if he goes to a team that is built for him. And I'm talking about a Big Ten kind of team, like what happened with Will Howard, who transferred from Kansas State and then won a national championship the next year. People are going to be salivating at the fact of Avery Johnson most likely hitting the portal this next year. And it sucks being a Kansas State fan, knowing that he's probably the best quarterback that Kansas State has had in a long time, maybe the history when you're talking about talent and physicality and just a performance level, but they haven't been able to open up for him at all and actually prove or release that talent in Manhattan. Somebody else is going to, and it's going to sting even more.
I'm calling it right now, Tennessee.
I would hate it, but it wouldn't shock me, but I would hate it.
If the quarterback they have now continues, I think he might have another year. If he does, and Tennessee may not be the option, but like he may end up just trying the draft because he's had a really good year. I don't think he's really an NFL guy, but he seems to be kind of fly by the seat of his pants. And Tennessee's got some deep pockets. And there's I'll
go with Oklahoma. I'm not going NFL. I think he hits the portal. I do, unless something crazy happens over the next couple weeks and he just decides and says, I'm a Kansas guy, I'm staying here. But if the season continues to go down the drain and you look at the rest of the schedule for Kansas State, it's hard to be optimistic after what you've seen. I think he hits the portal, and I think he goes to another team. I think the SEC makes a lot of sense for Avery Johnson and his athleticism, though.
LSU, Oklahoma, there's a lot of teams that Miami maybe. There's all kinds of possibilities where he could do something. So, it'll be interesting to see what he does. Don't rule out Oregon because Dante might turn pro. Yeah, he'll have suitors. He'll definitely have suitors. As for the rest of the roster and the thoughts about it, we're going to talk about that next here on this crossover of Locked On Kansas State and Locked On the Portal. Today's show is brought to you by Mazda, who crafts cars for those who do more than simply move. You can feel the Japanese craftsmanship in every detail, from the metallic accents to the available Napa leather upholstery. You can make everyday drives feel like anything but, from smooth handling to intuitive controls. Like our players, we sweat every detail, because when you make every move count, impossible becomes irrelevant. Mazda. Move and be moved. All right, it's time to talk about the overwhelming theme here. You got a bye week coming up. Not this week, but the one after. Yes.
Yeah, TCU first and a bye week.
This is just how it works. This is not a K-State thing. I don't think it will happen, but I believe we've got to mention it, and it completely impacts the roster in the portal and recruiting. If you're going to fire Kleiman early, that's when you would do it. You and I both don't think that it's a possibility, but I think it would be malpractice not to mention it. I'm sure there are people on the BOT and the powers that be that are in the K-State world that are like, okay, this ain't working. This ain't working. The problem is always the same, and I haven't even looked it up. Kleiman's buyout, plus getting rid of the staff, plus hiring another head coach, plus hiring a search firm, plus hiring the assistants. You know what that's all about? It's the number one word in our society, Christian. What's that word?
I'm saying pizza, but I think it's money.
Yeah. Yeah, pizza's good. That's another one. That's a solid answer. Okay. Money is the problem there. I don't look at Kansas State as the kind of program that's looking to break the bank. I'm guessing that their Olympic sports drain them pretty hard to begin with anyway. They need football to win, so it's a 51 way, 50 the other kind of scenario. But butts and seats probably aren't going to happen next year anyway. I could see him even being back. It's possible. Again, it depends on the buyout. But with all that there, here's the other part. How many kids and their parents don't like the awkwardness of it? And they're like, well, he's going to be gone this year or next. Let's get out of here. That would be my concern as a K-State person. Agree or disagree?
Agreed for the most part. I think that if you wound up keeping Chris Kleiman if he does not turn the season around, you're going to have this sense of uncertainty, and it's going to impact recruiting one way or another. Absolutely agree on that standpoint. When you're talking about the bye week heading into this week, or after the game against TCU, and then you have a bye week, the game following that is the streak against Kansas in Lawrence. I don't think that's the right time to move and go to an interim head coach, because then your first interim head coach would be against the streak. I'm with you. I understand that maybe that's not the case. But if you look at the 4 college football head coaches that have been fired so far this year, UCLA, Virginia Tech, Arkansas, and I'm missing the other one, but all 4 of those, only 2 of the 4 have been fired when there was a bye week heading out. Arkansas, and I think the other one was Virginia Tech. So take that for what you will when you're putting it into perspective. Moving forward. So it's something just to remember. However, I am in the boat that if they can't turn this around, you have to make a change moving forward, or it's only going to impact, because you're right. They rely on college football to make their money, and they spend a lot in college basketball. That hasn't been working out very well over the last couple of years. Where I think it's just going to happen, and here's my thought process on it all. If I had to shake the crystal ball, the magic 8 ball, and give you my overall opinion on this, I think if they don't get to at least 7 wins, let's just say 6 to make it a baseline. If they don't make a bowl game, then Chris Kleiman will make it through the season regardless. I think he makes it through the season regardless. I really do, unless they decide to move on from him if he loses to TCU and Kansas. Maybe that's where it happens. But what will happen is he'll get through the season. If the basketball team starts to falter early because they were really bad in non-conference last year, then I think we get a decision from the athletic director, and then we start seeing a waterfall effect. That's my thought process, especially where the transfer portal lines up in the beginning of January. The basketball season will already be in full swing for about a month and a half. And I think the turn of the year, end of December, early January, is when we'll see a huge decision for Kansas State athletics, not just the football program.
Boy, that's a lot of cash flow, brother. I don't know what the AD situation is in terms of how popular whether that individual was looking to move on after they capitalize a case. I have no idea.
He's older. He will retire if it's over and done. He's older. Gene Taylor.
So he doesn't want to be a part of it, probably wants somebody else to have to deal with this mess, and be my guess then, just like you. So I would not blame that person, because that's not much fun. He might just be the quote unquote consultant on the side. But to be the one that's blamed for the hire, screw that. I'd be out too.
Yep.
So I get it. Well, here's the other part of this. The vultures are going to come calling. In the meantime, we've already talked about Avery. We've already talked about, the fastest running back in college football. He's certainly in that. Edwards is right there. I've seen him run sub 4.4 myself. What about the receiver? Chase
Brown.
Like, he's a junior. He's got another year, right? Technically.
He does. Yeah. And honestly, I think if any of the offensive players were to test the draft, Jace Brown would be one that you would think to do it, because he's been very impressive. Every single game so far this season, I've made the joke. It's like death taxes and big play Jace. You've always get at least one big play from Jace Brown. In the Baylor game, he should have scored a touchdown, but they ripped the helmet off and they decided to blow the play dead. Although I have seen on social media that maybe that was the wrong call by the refs, because it was a defensive penalty, but we don't have to go in that far, because Kansas State got a field goal instead of a touchdown, and that could have changed the game, but that's a different story for a different day. If I had to put anything down on one player going into the NFL draft early this season, it would be Jace Brown. But if he decided to stay in college football, he would be very good on another team, and especially because he's very good friends with Avery Johnson. If Johnson hits the portal, I wouldn't be shocked if he decided to hit the portal and follow him. That wouldn't shock me in the slightest.
Oof, that'd be rough, man. That would be rough. Anybody else, especially defensive players, that you would be worried about the Wolves coming after to make offers?
Yes. Honestly, the first one that comes to my mind is true freshman Logan Bartley. I think he's had a really good showing so far in the defensive secondary, not getting as much snaps as I'd hope he'd get, but every time he's out there, with the exception of like the first game he played, he's made some sort of an impact. Whether that's a positive or maybe a slightly negative impact. Against Arizona, he had a targeting call that was eliminated from the game, but he still was super aggressive and showed physicality, and you can't really take that away from him on that one. I think he is going to be he's going to be a player that I think we talk about being on Sundays a few years down the road. So it was a highly sought after recruit. And the fact that he's already getting good playing time, I could see him testing in the portal if things fall astray and some of these coaches don't wind up being there, the guys that recruited a guy like Logan Bartley, especially since he, I believe, is an Oklahoma kid. So definitely makes you think where he could go.
Yeah, there's a school just outside Oklahoma City. It's got a lot of money. So
and doing very well in recruiting these days. Yeah.
Yeah, that would be an interesting one. When we come back, I want to talk about the big overall picture of the Big 12, because this is also a part of Kansas State's problem. When, like Christian and I both thought they would conservatively be in the Big 12 title game. Seeing other teams that you thought you were a lot better, them still competing for a chance at the Big 12, how does that impact K-State? And let's just talk about the Big 12 in general, because it is wild. That is next here on this crossover Locked On the Portal and K-State. Today's show is brought to you by our friends at Monarch Money. Most people can't name all of their financial accounts or even what they're worth, whether it's 401ks, properties, or investments. And when you don't have the full picture, you can end up leaving money on the table. That's why there is Monarch Money. It's an all-in-one personal financial tool that brings your entire financial life together in one clean, easy-to-use interface on your laptop or your phone. Monarch is built for people with busy lives. If you put off organizing your finances, Monarch is for you. Monarch does the heavy lifting for you. You can link all your accounts in minutes, see clear data visuals, get smart categorization of your spending, and finally feel in control of your money without ever touching a spreadsheet. Monarch is going to place everything at your fingertips in one comfy place, making it easy to be organized. Don't let financial opportunities slip through the cracks. Use code LOCKEDONCollege at monarchmoney.com in your browser for half off your first year. That's 50% off your first year at monarchmoney.com with code LOCKEDONCollege. We are also brought to you by PrizePicks. Every day we make decisions, but on PrizePicks, being right can actually get you paid. Don't miss the excitement of this football season with PrizePicks, where it's good to be right. Playing PrizePicks is such a fun, simple way to add more excitement to football. You just pick more or less on player projections, like Josh Allen's passing yards or Saquon Barkley rushing for a touchdown, and you're in the game. So it's pretty simple. Up to you on how many different players you want to do, but it's a simple stat. Rushing yards, interceptions, passing yards, a quarterback on how many times he completes a pass. There's all kinds of different things you can do with PrizePicks. Download the PrizePicks app today and use code LOCKEDONCollege to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. That's Locked On College for $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. PrizePicks. It's good to be right. The perception of where you should be, combined with the gasoline of seeing your rivals, your peers, the teams you think you were better than, watching them win, that gasoline going onto the fire when teams like, Arizona State, Texas Tech, Brigham Young, seeing those teams do better than you and considerably so, I think that's going to impact how the rest of this season goes for Kansas State from an administrative standpoint. Here's my perspective. Christian, I want your take. I think Tech's going to go undefeated, but everybody knows why. They're kind of there's no Cinderella there. They bought their way to where they're at, and they've done a good job. But BYU, Arizona State, after all they lost, etc., that's probably going to make people wonder if a coaching hire shouldn't be made in some capacity, or at least coordinator, something. Am I wrong on that? Because I didn't think BYU had a chance in the world. They lost their quarterback for some awkward reasons. They're playing a freshman and they're better than you. How is that like? That's got to sting if you're an administrator, a coach, a player, and the all-important Rich Booster. What's your take?
Yeah, 100%. One thing I want to clear up real quick from the last segment, Logan Bartley from Naples, Florida, not Oklahoma. Just want to throw that out there. But let's move on from this one right here. With BYU, first, although they did play a freshman quarterback, I wasn't sold on it either, but they do have an amazing defense. I'm going to give them a little bit of a credit there, and I'm with you. I think Texas Tech is really good. The only team that I think they're losing to, if they do lose to, is that BYU team. Because that game is in Lubbock. I get that. It's right after the Kansas State game. Not that that means anything, but that's when that game is. And I think that could be potentially the fact that they play in the Big 12 championship game. They might play that game twice this year, BYU and Texas Tech. The fact that they play against each other, though, could impact maybe one of them missing out. So I think that's a really crucial game. I believe that one is November 8th, if I remember correctly. Either way, though, when you look at this Big 12 team, this conference, and you see some of these schools that are stepping up in big ways, of course, Texas Tech being in their own category of their own with the tiers that they're spending money on, sure. But Arizona State found a way to stay relevant again, even with losing some of their players, going to the NFL. Iowa State, who has been in the news a lot lately, losing commits left and right because of money issues. They are still being relevant and they're still finding a way to go. That is probably the one that hurts the most because you can compare yourself to your Farmageddon rival in Iowa State. You have better boosters. You have a better NIL thing. And at the talent level, and this is in football and basketball over the last couple of years, Iowa State is taking the cake. Then, of course, you see the $300 million from Booth and with Kansas in Lawrence, in your own home state, that has just got spent and money getting put in there. It's a bad time to be on the downhill, on the regression for Kansas State fans, for the entire program, for all of athletics, not just football, because you have Iowa State on the up and up. You have Kansas obviously going to make a big step, probably trying to mimic what Texas Tech is doing over the next couple of years. And they said it's not going to be just basketball, which you might have assumed. They're going to focus on the football side as well. And then you see some of these other Big 12 schools that you wouldn't expect to shine, like some of the newcomers like Houston and Cincinnati actually performing well in the Big 12 conference this year, and Kansas State, a team that you'd expect to be fighting for Arlington and not being out of it in the middle of October, not even being in the conversation anymore. So yeah, it absolutely stings, and you got to find a way to maybe make a change, whether that is a coordinator at the bye week, which of course we're talking about maybe making some changes if something happens after the TCU game. I think that's your best case scenario, Brian, is maybe seeing a change in coordinator. If I had to lean which one it would be, it'd be on the offensive side.
anything's possible. They did play better offensively, but
They did.
they're still inconsistent. That's the problem. Like, you show that high watermark, but with the pick six. Like, it's just weird how Kansas State still shoots itself in the foot. And I mean, like, at the NFL level, they got a stat for it. Like, when you have a scoop and score or a block punt for a touchdown or interception goes for a score, you lose like 78% of the time. I doubt it's much different in college.
I can give you three reasons why I think Kansas State lost the football game to Baylor this past Saturday. All of them are on the offensive side, and all of them I can stem back to why the offensive coordinator and the coaching made bad decisions. Number one, we can talk about that pick six first. That was on a first down play when they should have been wasting clock because they were up by 2 scores at the end of the third quarter. Right. And they should have been moving it down, being a little bit more conservative. They threw it on a first down. You can call that there. And in the first quarter, they turned over Sawyer Robertson on an interception. They went 3 and out and they punted. And the very next drive, they got a fumble and they picked up. They had 2 turnovers from Baylor. Each drive, they went 3 and out. And both of those times involved and included a 3rd and long play where they threw the football before the sticks and they had to punt the football. And then the fourth one, in the very last drive of the fourth quarter, with the exception of the drive where they tried to kick a field goal, they were in the red zone and they threw it inside the 5 twice and stopped the clock, had to kick a field goal and gave a lot more time back to Sawyer Robertson. A lot of time decisions, a lot of play calling, questionable decisions from the offense. That's why, although the offense played better, Brian, I think if anybody needs to go, it needs to be the offensive coordinator, Matt Wells, first.
I'm not saying you're wrong. I'm not saying you're wrong. The other thing, just from a generic perspective, I just think this is interesting for the playoff. Barring something unforeseen, do you agree with the following? Tech is going to go 11-1 or 12-0, barring some crazy injuries, which college football, that can happen. I mean, their defense is so much better than everybody else's in the league. I don't think it's that close. Even BYU's pretty good. They don't have the same NFL talent in the defensive line. They don't. So I know that the Big 12 will deny this publicly because it's all politics, but they're very concerned right now that this is a one-bid league. I think the only way that 2 teams get into playoff is if Tech is upset in the championship game, because they're going to get in as an at-large. Am I wrong?
I don't disagree when you're thinking about that now halfway through the season. But there are multiple teams, when you look at the schedule, there are multiple teams that could find themselves at 10-2 or 11-1, and there might even be a 10-2 team that's left out of the Big 12 championship game. So as much as I think I agree with you, to be completely honest. I think if I had to make my projections right now, I think Tech would be the easiest one in, and I'd have a hard time trying to find a second Big 12 team to put in there based on how all the rankings are set up. So if Tech winds up going, because I do think they're going to be undefeated, maybe 11-1 at the very worst case, they would have to be upset. Tech still finds a way to get in there. If I had to give you my guess now, I think BYU and Tech are the easy ones to say, but don't count out Arizona State, man. They're one bad play away from Mississippi State losing that game. They're one step away from being undefeated, just next to Tech as well. And they've been running the table against some of these really good other Big 12 schools like TCU, as well. So don't count them out. And Iowa State, they had a bad fall against Cincinnati, but they're still a decent team. I think the Big 12 is going to be really fun to look at in the second half of the season. Unfortunately, Kansas State's not going to be in that conversation. Maybe they can play spoiler once or twice, but that's about it. But I think I'm with you. I think, if I had to say right now, if I had to throw some money down on it with our friends at FanDuel, I'd say the Big 12 is only a 1-bid lead this year.
The other wild card for me is Cincinnati.
Insane.
Like, it's so random.
No one saw it coming. No one did.
I mean, they should have beat Nebraska in game 1, and if they did, they'd be undefeated, right?
Yep.
I mean, the Sorsby kid, I think he's a 6-year senior. He was at Indiana at one point. He's Cincinnati, blah, blah, blah. He's good.
Yeah.
Like, anybody that takes them lightly, and ask Iowa State, he can run. He's very pinpoint. He knows the offense, and they got a couple of pretty darn good running backs. One of them's a transfer from Ohio State. They're going to beat somebody else at minimum and cause problems. But if they finish 9-3, 10-2, like, that offense can keep them in every game because they got a veteran quarterback that doesn't make errors. So he's borderline dynamic, which never thought I would say that because I thought he was just a guy. But
I agree with you.
Wrong.
Yeah, they're the team, the one team left out of the AP top 25. I think they were 26, like top one that was receiving votes. But if you look at the rest of their schedule, if you want to have fun with this one, they play UCF, then they play Oklahoma State, then they play Baylor. That could be a fun game. At Utah could be a fun game. Arizona, BYU, TCU. That's a 10-2. They can go 10-2. And if they do that, they can find themselves in Arlington and maybe, just maybe, find a way to upset Texas Tech or somebody else inside that conversation. So, if you're the second half of the Big 12 is going to be fun.
If you're going to upset Tech, you're not going to just run the ball on them. You got to have a quarterback that's throwing dimes.
100%. Yeah, if somebody's going to upset Texas Tech, Cincinnati's not the team that I think can do it. I think it's a team like Arizona State with Jordan Tyson, or I think it's a team like BYU with
50-50 ball guy.
Yeah.
The problem, I don't think that Cincinnati's got the line to run it, but they got the running back. They got a couple of pretty good running backs, but I don't think they match up in the trenches. Sorsby would have to be like 25-32, something like that. But
I agree.
Still, but that's the Big 12, and that's why it's fun. Christian, tell everybody where they can find your work, my friend.
Locked On Kansas State, bringing you daily Kansas State Wildcat coverage like nobody else. Anywhere you listen to podcasts and on YouTube, always free and available. Your team every day.
Appreciate it, brother. You can find the Portal Podcast wherever you get your pods, YouTube, Spotify, Apple, and everywhere else. We will see you again soon.